We'll call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody that is in present. Present right now, and just let you know that the mayor, Jason, he's not here yet. Not too sure if he will be here. The pledge will be offered by Councilman Hemphill, and invocation will be by, what's his name, Bella?
Councilman Andazola. I forget who I am too sometimes. Lord God, Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day which you bestowed upon us, Heavenly Father. We ask you to come into our hearts and our spirits, Lord, as we come to make decisions for this wonderful community of ours. We ask you to please bless our manager, our clerk, our department heads, all of our employees that do such an excellent job for this great community, Lord. And we thank everybody here who's here tonight, that's here to represent for some type of organization here on behalf of the city. We thank you all, and we ask you to please bless them all. And this time, Lord, we ask you to please envelop your arms around our beloved mayor, Lord, that you give him the guidance and need that he needs, Heavenly Father, for him and his family to continue the leadership for Safford as he continues to lead us. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Do we have any comments from citizens on non-agenda items? No? On agenda items?
Those three, but they're for the public hearing.
Okay. Then we'll go ahead and open up our public hearing.
But we have the presentations first, Vice Mayor.
Okay, that's right, okay. It's the presentation from the Light the World Giving Machineries. Jamie, please.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. We have President Monteith here to present the checks to the local entities who received donations through the Light the World Giving Machines.
Good evening, members of the City Council. Just a reminder of the Giving Machine and what it is. The Giving Machine is an initiative of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it's a chance for people all over the world to give money to charitable organizations. We had the great opportunity this year, it's the first time we've had this, of having a traveling giving machine that came through the state. It came to Flagstaff and Tucson as well as Safford, as you know. And we had great input from many community members, and I wanted to give some thanks to a few of those before we hand out these checks. First, I want to thank Mayor Jason Couts and the council members for your support in allowing us to do this, as well as City of Safford employees, Pam Frost, Jamie Embrick, and Lance Henry, who were instrumental. Safford City Police Department for their watchful care during the 2 weeks that we had the giving machines here. Reed Richens, who did our sound and our stage for our event. CMI Quick Copy, Mechie's Restaurant, because they put up a banner for us. Thatcher School District also had a banner. The Safford librarian, Victoria Silva. Without her, we would not have had a successful training and launch event. Members of the Ministerial Association, and so many members of the different religious communities congregations throughout our valley. And especially to the many members of the Light the World Giving Machine Committee, who were led by Mark and Nona Harrington. Lastly, but I think most importantly, we want to thank all of the community members. We had thousands of contributions in our community, and that's what allowed us to be able to present these checks tonight. And so I'd like to thank all of those people. And we'd like to go ahead, thank you. And we have 4 checks this evening to give out. Would like to go ahead and do that now if this is the right time for that.
Yes.
First is Our Neighbors Farm and Pantry. That's Kai Luttrell. We'll go over here. Okay, go over here.
representative of the council to come up and help the festival.
Good job.
And I was just handed a pewter ornament. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next, we have the Mount Graham Safe House, and I think representing them is Jeanette Aston. Next, we have the International Rescue Committee, represented by Barbara Franklin. And our last check is for Peace Through Music, represented by Trey Hume. Thank you again for your time and for supporting this worthy cause.
Okay, and moving on, number 2, the State Transportation Board, there's a presentation by Jenny. I like the way the place empties after all these things.
I'm getting anxiety already. It's been a while.
Are you talking about the electrical department tonight?
Yeah. So I'll be brief. I have a 6:30 meeting at Thatcher. So I just want to thank you for having me. I spoke with Councilman Lopez and Michael at the luncheon last Monday, asking if I could get on your agenda to introduce myself and let you know about the new thing that has happened that to me in December and to us. So I was appointed by Governor Ducey on December 28th to be on the Arizona State Transportation Board. My term goes through January 2028. For those of you who don't know the power and what the State Transportation Board does, we're responsible for establishing a complete system of highways and interstates throughout the entire state. There are 7 of us that oversee a 5-year plan budget exceeding $6 billion. We're the final authority on establishing, opening, altering, vacating, or abandoning any portion of any state highway or interstate. We award all construction contracts across the state. We monitor the status of construction and authorize issuance of revenue bonds for financing needed for transportation improvements throughout the state. We determine the program planning with regards to the transportation facilities, and we adopt and administer the $6 billion five-year ADOT construction plan. It includes interstates, highways, airports, and bridges. We distribute monies appropriated from the State Aviation Fund for planning, design, development, land acquisition, construction, and improvement of publicly owned airport facilities, and we also approve the airport construction. We're granted our powers through the governor, and we serve in an advisory capacity to the director of the state of ADOT. Our new director's name is Jennifer Toth. John Halakowski just retired after 14 years. Jennifer's gonna do a great job. She's very approachable. She's been with ADOT for quite some time. I'm excited to meet her in person. I visit with her over the phone quite a bit, but it's a great thing. So these are the 7 board members with the districts. I'm responsible for District 4, which includes Gila, Graham, and a portion of Pinal County. So my district goes up to the Payson area, up at the top there, and then over to Maricopa, the city of Maricopa, and then to Greenlee County, and then down to Cochise County. So it's a pretty large district. And I'm one of 7 people. I'll serve until 2028, and you won't have a representative from Graham County for another 18 years. So it's a 6-year cycle that goes through 3 counties. So I kind of zoomed into my district. Again, it's Gila, Graham, and Pinal counties. I have 3 ADOT district offices within my district: the Southeast office, the South Central office, and North Central office. It's funny, you know, I see the issues in our small community with, like, say, Highway 70 from Thatcher to Safford, 191, maintenance issues on our highway streets. We need passing lanes between here and San Carlos, just different things. And it's amazing the number of communities that have the same issues as we do. So we meet every 3rd Friday of the month. And probably the first hour of our meeting is open to public comment. And it's just a repetition of different issues from small communities and large communities with the same problems that we have on our highways. So when you think about that, there's a lot of small communities in rural Arizona, and it does take a while to hear them all, but a lot of them I hear every month after month after month after month. And so anytime you guys want to sit in on those meetings, they're through teleconference as well, and they're very interesting. We go through the 5-year plan, budgets, issues, again, with all of our highways and things like that. It's very, there's a lot of information that's provided in those meetings. So I met with Todd Emery several weeks ago, and we went over some of the projects that we have here that are going to probably directly affect most of you. On Highway 60, these are scheduled for advertisement in 2023, so we're probably looking at maybe another year before they get started. But the Queen Creek Bridge is going to be replaced, and the Waterfall Canyon Bridge right on our site of Superior. And on 191, there's a 3-way roundabout in planning. It goes up at the intersection of 3-way up here at the end of 191. And then some pavement preservation out on 191 from 266 to 366, which is Fort Grant to Swift Trail. So those are all in the planning processes, and they're scheduled for to bid this year. So you'll see those projects come active as well. And we have a few active projects happening on 70. I don't know when you drive to Phoenix where you see the pavement where it's got some overlay and some regular pavement. They've taken some areas on 60 and they're just making some repairs. Right now they're on winter shutdown, so those will kick up again. So make sure you keep an eye on ADOT's website if you're traveling to Phoenix on any delays with those projects, and they should be kicking up pretty soon. So, and again, City of Safford's on there too, the 20th Avenue project. And then they're also doing some surface treatment on 191 I-10 to 10 Ranch. So over the past few meetings that we've had, we've been looking at our 5-year plan, and I just want to point out a couple of things that I noticed right off the bat. So the plan has different budgets and historical statistics for every portion of what we do, again, which was interstates, highways, airports, and bridges. And I just want to focus a little bit on a couple of graphs that kind of stood out to me as far as rural Arizona goes and our highways. So this is a pavement condition grant, and they have 4 criteria of pavement condition, well, 3, I'm sorry: fair, poor, and good. Green is good, yellow is fair, red is poor. So back, if you look at the far left side of the graph in 2010, you'll see that 72%, these are interstates, 72% of the interstates were in good condition, 27 were in fair condition, and really none were in poor condition. But if we zoom over to the far right, 2021, we're looking at 51% of our interstates are in good condition, 47 are in fair condition, and just 1% are in poor condition. When you think about driving 80 miles an hour, well, 75 technically, but 80-ish, you want your freeway to be in very good condition. You don't want potholes and things that would cause safety issues. And so those are kept very, very well. But when you look at pavement conditions on non-freeways, these are the smaller highways, and you go to 2010, 44% of our highways were in good condition, and 55% were in fair condition, and just 0.5% were in poor condition. But if you zoom forward to 2021, 17% of our highways are in good condition, so down from 44%. And you can see the trend. 76% of our highways are in fair condition, and 6% of our highways are in poor condition. So I just see a trend there, and I brought that up at the last meeting, because what I've learned is all the focus has been on expansion. You know, when you go to Tucson and Phoenix, you see all the new interchanges coming in, and that's expansion. They expand to commit to the upgrade of population, the more people, the more vehicles, so they're always forethinking ahead for that. But I really feel like the maintenance of our U.S. highways and routes is declining because we're really focusing on a lot of that expansion. And so I did bring that up, and I told the board that I'd really want to see, with our 5-year plan, I want to see more of a balance with our maintenance and our expansion and then the other areas that we work on. And so it was kind of an eye-opener, you know, when you look at the colors, and when you drive down our roads and U.S. highways down, you know, you feel it, you see it. So I just wanted to introduce myself and let you know that I'm really excited to represent rural Arizona to the best of my abilities, and you have my business card. Anything I can do for you, please call me. Most of you have my cell phone number anyways, but it's on there. And I'm just really excited to work for you and rural Arizona in my district. And so if I can answer any questions, I will surely do
I'd like
that.
to just make a comment. I'm glad you're there, and just the idea that you brought up the fact about maintenance, because that's something that gets away from you, and then it's very costly to catch up,
And sometimes you can't catch up.
right?
Yeah, so it's very important to really hold that at the same value as you do the expansion and things. You can't let that go by the wayside, so.
Mrs. Howard, I didn't realize that you had to do with the airport. You know, we
Yes.
do our best to take care of our airport, so I'm glad you're there. And then your other hat, the vice mayor, I'm hoping you have some say in the HERF funds and that they don't sweep them away from us, so.
I hope not. And you know, the gas tax hasn't been raised, I want to say, since 91 or 92. I really think that we need to look at that as well. We need to look at I've already brought this up, electric vehicles have no gas tax. Up until this January, the license tax, which is a whole other fund, but it's incorporated into the HERF funding. Up until this year, to license an electric vehicle was a very minimal, like 1% of a gas vehicle. And so slowly they've worked electric vehicles up to the same licensing fees. But again, they don't pay a tax to drive on the highways and the roads, and so that really needs to be looked at. And that's a legislative issue, so I plan to
And
rally.
I don't know if gambling money is in your pocket too.
I'm actually, my Senate confirmation hearing is coming up. When they schedule that, I'll spend about 3 days down at the Capitol and at ADOT learning with the CFO on all these types of fundings, because a lot of them are restricted in how they're allocated. So when I come back next time, I will have more information for you there, so.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you,
Any other
Jenny.
questions? All right, thanks again.
Then we'll move on to item number 8, public hearing. We'll have a public hearing, we'll open a public hearing in compliance with Arizona Revised Statute 38.431. And we'll hear comments regarding the names rezone. Jamie?
Yes, good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. This is a public hearing request for the Mayor and Council to hold a public hearing for a proposed rezoning of Graham County parcel 102-01008. The applicants are Joseph and Janet Names. They live out of state. They could not be here this evening, but is there? Yes, their son is here, yes, to represent them. And this area, you'll see it is on the corner of Airport and Sanchez Road. And when it was annexed into the city, it was not zoned. It was split off of the larger Anderson Farms parcel. So the names are requesting that this property be zoned agricultural residential. They would like to build a home and have barns and facilities for that. It's approximately 30-acre parcel. They did have their neighborhood meeting. They have met with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and you have a recommendation for approval that was unanimously given by the Planning and Zoning Commission. All amendments to this title shall be made in accordance with the general plan. It is public policy that this title shall not be amended unless it can be shown that the changed or changing conditions make the proposed amendment reasonably necessary to promote the purposes of this title. The Planning and Zoning Commission, at their public hearing on their January 17th, 2023 meeting, recommend approving this request for the 2 following reasons. The requested zoning fits the rural location of the property, and the property is compatible with the surrounding uses in Graham County. With that, their representative is here, and I will stand for questions.
And was there anybody from the public that had any comments? And if not, then we'll move on to item number 2.
So Jamie, our code apply, that we have here within the city limits applies out there too? They can only have 2 potbelly pigs, and that applies clean out there too?
Yes, sir. So they are within the city limits, and I have listed the uses that they can have in the packet, and they can have livestock, they can have the same thing that any agriculturally residentially zoned property within the city can have, yes, because they are within the city limits.
Being clean out there, if they were to want more, they can bring it forward in a variance?
They could, yes, but it seems like they have very simple plans. They just wanted a large piece and not very many neighbors,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
And we'll move on to item number 2. That's the Kempton rezone.
Yes, Mayor and Council, let me get that. Okay, Vice Mayor and Council, this is a request for the City Council to hold a public hearing for the proposed rezoning of Graham County parcels 103-09005J, 103-09005H, and 103-09005K. This is a little different case. This is for 3 parcels. They are currently undeveloped and were previously used for an agricultural field. They were zoned agricultural residential. The purpose of the applicable zoning for the requested highway commercial district is the commercial uses and services generally maintained in central business district fringe areas where the density of traffic and building area is not conducive to desirable residential living. This district encourages heavier commercial establishments intended for highway locations. And in your packet, I have highlighted the use that Mr. Kempton would like to have on this property. It is service stations, automobile and truck repair with body and fender, and paint shops if enclosed in a building. And the applicant has had their neighborhood meeting. That was held on November 29th, 2022, and they had their public hearing on January 17th, 2023 with the Planning and Zoning Commission. And the Planning and Zoning Commission has a written recommendation in your packet for approval. And for the following reasons: the rezone will provide for infill development. The rezone will allow a local business to expand and remain within the city of Stafford, and the written decision is attached. And we have a presentation for you from Mr. Kimpton and his attorney. I will stand for questions, and then they will have a presentation for you also.
I don't remember seeing the access on the map. Is that coming next?
Yes, and
Okay.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Councilman Lopez, they will give a quite detailed vicinity map and the proposed ingress and egress on the property.
Then was there anybody in the public that wanted to make any comments? If not, then we'll go ahead and move on.
Yes, Ms. Dukes has a presentation for you.
Yeah.
She is a representative for Mr. Kimpton.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. My name is Heather Dukes, and I'm an attorney. My address is 5527 North 25th Street. I'm here today on behalf of the applicant and property owner, Kip Kempton, and I'm actually here today to request a 30-day continuance of this matter to the March 27th hearing. As the director mentioned, this case is a request to rezone 3 parcels from agricultural residential to highway commercial C2 zoning district for the purpose of developing a new automobile body shop for Kempton Chevrolet. As part of this process, we have ordered title reports for all 3 parcels, and we have reached out to surveyors to get an Alta survey performed. And the Alta surveyor, just the surveyors in general, are way behind schedule. I'm sure other applicants have run into that. And so we need a better understanding of the easements that apply to this property in order to be able to lay out the site plan. We are hoping that in 30 days, we can have that Alta survey prepared, have a better understanding of the property rights we're dealing with, and then we can come back before you to request the rezoning. Between now and then, nothing will change about the application. The use will remain the same. All the information that we've shared at the neighborhood meeting to the Planning and Zoning Commission will remain the same. This is merely a decision of whether or not to move forward with the request for rezoning. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Do we have to vote on giving him a 30-day extension, or what? How does that work? Do we have to vote on a 30-day extension? or-
Vice Mayor, I don't believe, I think you can table it, can't you?
So this is just the public hearing. There's nothing to vote on or do anything with it. So they're just bringing it to the public for any comments or anything. From what I understand, the site plan isn't gonna change. It's just whether or not you guys are gonna continue with the project, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so
Okay,
this
good.
is just the public hearing for any comments from the public, whether or not, they're for or against anything that they may have to say
Okay.
regarding the rezone itself.
I have one question. So would this normally be scheduled for March 27th? Is the next time we would come back before you? But that's the issue, is that we need at least 30 days to get the Alta survey finished.
Correct, there will be a meeting on March 27th.
Okay.
If, once you work with Jamie and work that out, then you can bring it to the March 27th meeting.
Great, thank you so much for that clarification. No, sir, we have not. We had,
I can hear you, Bill.
we had a citizen
Did you want to-
participation.
They need to take action. Yes, yes.
I'm sorry, city attorney wanted to make a comment. Go ahead, Bill.
Mr. Vice Mayor, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Yes. Yeah, what we need to do, and I think Ms. Dukes would agree with me, we need to make sure the steps you take tonight don't require a renotice and republication. That will require a formal action by the council to table this to a date certain and a time certain for this very matter and the ordinance that comes later, so we don't have to republish.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, then do we have a motion to table this 30 days?
Is that?
Mr. Vice Mayor, it needs to be to a specific date.
But you guys are unable to actually provide that at this time, correct?
We would like to request to March 27th.
So March 27th, Bill, is the request?
That works.
And we need
And the time, you need to say the time as well, and the time as well.
6 PM.
So,
Okay.
That'll be the first thing on the agenda.
Correct.
right. So, yeah, Bill, this is the public hearing, not the ordinance.
No, what Bill is saying is so
I
you
know
don't have to
that,
republish
but we-
the actual public hearing notification in the paper and everything else. So
Okay.
if you just table it, the
See,
notifications that
they
have
may,
been put
they
out
may
for
want
this
to,
one's
they may
carry
want to
forward.
participate in the hearing again. So if you're going to need to, you should table both.
Okay.
Ms. Dukes, do you agree with me? Do you want to be able to have a renewed public hearing?
Yes, I would like to be able to come back on March 27th to give the presentation. If we decide to proceed forward, I'd like to give a presentation to the city council. And then at the time, the city council would make a motion and take a vote as to whether to approve our rezoning application.
So,
So
Bill,
both
based
the
on your
hearing and the
recommendation,
ordinance,
the public hearing and the ordinance both have to be tabled to a date certain?
and time, yes.
So is that a motion?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so Vice Mayor, you would make a motion to table the public hearing and the ordinance to the day and the time.
Well stated, yes.
Do we
Somebody
have to
else.
rearrange our meeting to make sure that time happens? Or
Or
could,
that just be
Oh,
on the
no,
agenda.
just to start, do it at the start of the meeting. Schedule it to occur at the meeting. Does the meeting start at 6?
yes.
Yes.
Yes, to be heard at the meeting starting at 6 o'clock on the 27th, or whatever the date is.
Madam Clerk, do we have to have that restated by the vice mayor, not by the manager, the way it's supposed to be said?
Correct, it needs to be stated by a
Let me
council.
just say it. I move that this public hearing and the ordinance that will follow both be moved to the March 27th meeting at 6 PM.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to reschedule the meeting, the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then we'll move on. We'll close public hearing and reconvene into our regular meeting. Item number 10, it's ordinance 023-0002. It's regarding the donation bins. Jamie?
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. This is, just one moment, let me get this rearranged. This is a request for the mayor and city council to have a second reading and approve ordinance 023002, an ordinance of the city of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, amending Title 8, Chapters 8.08.010 definitions, 8.08.020 litter on private property, and 8.08050 notice to remove to provide standards for the installation and maintenance of donation collection bins. This is the second reading. I do have the ordinance included in your packet. With that, Vice Mayor and Council, I will stand for questions.
One thing I have to say is good job to you and Mr. Casella, and I want to thank you guys for carrying this on. So I think our community is gonna really benefit from this, so.
Our
thank you.
pleasure. And thank you for your perseverance.
So at that, I'll make the motion, we approve, ordinance 023-002, the ordinance of the city of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, amending the Title 8, Chapter 8.08.010, definitions 8.08.020, litter on private property, and 8.08.050, notice to remove, to provide standards for installation and maintenance of donation collection bins.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 023-0002 regarding the donation bins. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Read it.
Ordinance number 023-002, an ordinance of the City of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, amending Title 8, Chapters 8.0, 8.010, definitions 8.08.020, litter on private property, and 8.0.8050, notice to remove, to provide standards for the installation, maintenance of donation collection bins.
Thank you. And we'll move on to ordinance number 023-003, election to office. Okay.
Vice Mayor and Council, I'm bringing ordinance number 023-003 for adoption and approval. Again, this is going to amend Title I, Chapter 1.08, elections, and what it's going to do is set the date for all seating of future elected members to the council for the first meeting within December. Does anybody have any questions?
Vice Mayor, I make the motion, we approve ordinance 023-003, elections to office.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 023-003. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Then we'll move on to number 3, it's ordinance number.
Vice Mayor, sorry, I just need to read that.
Read that, I'm sorry.
Ordinance number 023-003, an ordinance of the City of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, amending Title I, Chapter 1.08, Elections, Section 1.08.050, Elections to Office of the City of Safford Municipal Code.
Thank you. Then we'll just skip number 3, that's the one that we,
Correct, that was already tabled. Was that made in the
He's
motion?
here.
is the name.
Oh.
He's here.
oh, I'm sorry.
Jamie needs to present that.
Okay, then ordinance 023-004, it's the names rezone. Open for discussion.
Good evening again, Vice Mayor and Council. This is a request for a first reading for ordinance 023-004, an ordinance of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, effectuating a map amendment rezoning for Graham County parcel number 102-01008 to the City of Safford AR Agricultural Residential District. With that, I will stand for questions.
No comments? Then we do the first reading?
We need
Can these be done together, or do they have to be done
Just
separately?
discussion.
There's no,
oh, you're right.
Which one?
Just discussion.
On this discussion, can they be discussed together, or do we have to do them one at a time?
No, they have to, because they're on the agenda separately.
Okay.
Ordinance number 023-004, an ordinance of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, effectuating a map amendment rezoning Graham County Assessor's parcel number 102-01-008 to City of Safford A-R Agricultural Residential District.
Thank you.
Next one.
Then,
let me just ask one question. Jamie, is there a reason, I was under the impression that when these were annexed, that they were supposed to have been turned into a zone similar to what they were at the time. Does that not happen anymore, or what's the?
Yes, Vice Mayor and Councilman McGoy, that was the intent at the time, and all of the documentation that we can find, it was intended to happen, and the paperwork was never completed. And so, this would be the similar category for the surrounding farming residences in the county.
Are there other pieces of that that still need to be gone through that process?
Yes, there are the remaining Anderson parcel, and it is for sale.
And did the rifle range go through that? Did they get that fixed? At one point, it was incorrect.
Generally, if the City of Safford owns it, the zoning, we can't regulate zoning on privately owned. Mr. Sims, did you have a comment on public-owned property?
No,
Oh, okay. We were not aware until the names purchased this property that that area had not been zoned. They purchased it in December.
Thank you.
is this Jamie, is this you talking?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Vice Mayor and Council, you do need to take steps you raised a very good question. They should have been given transitional zoning after annexation. The county zoning stays in place, and you were supposed to assign them a zoning comparable to the county. You need to get Jamie to identify the parcels, and you need to get those parcels zoned, because right now they're not zoned. So that should be an action item.
Correct.
Folks, does that raise the question comparable to the county? That differs from us, doesn't it? with the-
They're cool.
No, you need to give them zoning that you have that is the most comparable to what they had. The statute says you have an obligation to zone them into comparable zoning, comparable to the county.
Then we can just give Jamie that direction, right?
Yes,
Okay.
she should come back and you should begin assigning that zoning.
Okay.
Yes, Vice Mayor and Council, we will make sure that there are no other outlying areas outside of the contiguous city limits, and we will bring those back.
Any other discussion or anything? Okay, Jamie. Then, let's see, we'll skip Kempton's ordinance. Okay. Then we'll move on to ordinance number 023-006. It's city officials appointment. John?
Good evening, Vice Mayor, members of council. Staff recommends the first read of ordinance 023-006 regarding proposed changes to the City of Safford Municipal Code related to the appointment, supervision, and dismissal of specific city officials. I won't read the entire background. Essentially, the first two paragraphs are a repeat of what we did. Unless someone would like me to go through that again, I would. I'll skip down to the third paragraph. City Council work session was held on February 13th, 2023 to review the current state of appointments, supervision, and dismissal of specific city officials. This review included a comparative of the city to the survey data obtained from Arizona League of Cities and Towns related to the appointment of city officials in 88 jurisdictions. A consensus of the City Council provided staff direction to draft code changes whereby the city manager would be responsible for appointment, supervision, and dismissal of most city officials as defined in the code. The analysis, staff identified 11 code sections needed to be amended to reflect council's consensus direction. The net result of the code changes clarifies that the city manager, the city attorney, and city magistrate are each appointed by and serve at the pleasure of the city council. Additionally, all other city officials identified in the code, sans the fire chief, are recommended to be appointed by and be under the direction of the city manager. Fire chief position will continue to be filled and managed per code language adopted via ordinance 022-001. Recommendation is to approve the holding of the first read of ordinance 023-006 related to the appointment, supervision, and dismissal of specific city officials. And we have the amended ordinance attached, code attached.
Any other discussion or questions? Go ahead, Luke.
I don't agree with this at all. So, the reasoning is, the police chief position, I just feel as a council, we still need to have some type of say. And that's just, my opinion on that, because we feel that we need to, the city manager, we put a lot of trust in him, but we need to make sure that we have some say in what is, I'm not saying we do his evaluations like what was said, we never did that. But the police chief works for him, but I think we need to be in the loop on hiring and firing.
Vice Mayor, I have a question. Manager Casal, was the police chief's position supposed to be in here too, or no, or?
Yes.
It was supposed to be in here? Okay, 'cause I
Yes.
don't-
Yeah, as I stated above, the city attorney, city magistrate, and I forget what the third one was.
Attorney, city magistrate.
City attorney,
fire chief.
yeah.
There's
Those
nothing
are
in
the
there about
ones
that.
that are direct council appointments, and again, based on the dialogue that we had in the last meeting, this is fairly typical for most communities, not all, and you do have options. There are different ways to approach it. And again, we went through the work session, and based on the feedback we got, I brought back what that discussion reflected. Councilman Arbizo was not here, so obviously he wants to provide some further input. But the way it's written is the way it was reflected, and it does include the police chief, where we've removed, police chief was the only position that the council approved the hire and dismissal part of it. And those have been removed in the amendments as written.
I just feel the council needs to have some say. I mean, we do your job, but if we question something, I don't wanna just totally be out of the loop.
Go ahead.
I know that the mayor has some second thoughts on this, and I told him that I would listen to what he wanted to say tonight, because I'm fine with it probably either way, but being that he's not here, how fast does this happen if we go forward with it?
Well, we bring it back at the next meeting for a second read, and then I believe it's 30 days, correct, before it actually takes effect.
At that point, could we still make changes to it?
I believe so, yes.
Because I would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
okay with that, but I would like to hear the mayor's thoughts on it, because he has changed his mind from what I understand. I just don't wanna
Okay.
And I'm gonna
throw
kick
that
the,
out.
sorry, Councilman Miller, I apologize. I'm gonna kick the can down the road, but I would, and I'm still under the impression from what I said the last time about the city clerk being underneath this. I feel that position should be underneath this too, but that's just me personally, okay? And, from what I see, I don't know how the rest of you feel about that.
I just, going through the policies and what's been amended, it looks really bad, if you look at it. I don't know, all the council approval is all taken out.
Would you like to go through them? We can do that. The ones that are in there are naturally the ones where council approval has been removed was the point of the exercise, so that's why they would be reflected in that way. But if you'd like to go through them, we can go through them and talk about each one and why they look the way they do. It's up to you.
Yeah. Because the only thing we got anything to say over was the city magistrate, which we don't even have a city magistrate position.
You know, the way I feel about this, the city manager, he works with the employees, staff on down. We really don't, we're here at the meetings, we make policy and that type thing. As far as the city clerk, how often do we see her? She makes our agenda, things like that. The city manager has the most contact, and as far as the police chief and that, he brings the final recommendation back to the council for approval. Is that right, John?
I'm sorry.
You bring your recommendation of hiring, say, the police chief to the council for
Yes.
our approval, right?
But you would not be in the approval process as written.
Pardon?
You would not be in the approval process as written. Where you would participate is, we would have, during the hiring process, council would be part of the vetting, but not part of the decision-making.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's what I'm saying is, we'll be totally left out of the loop.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't feel like you put trust in your city manager. But if there's a questionable call, we have no say.
You get rid of him. He works for us.
Yeah, but then the people that have resigned and quit and stuff, they lost their job.
Councilman Lopez, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What's your overall feeling about all this? You were the one that brought this about the fire chief and all that, and bring it to light and all that. And what's your feeling about the police chief?
When I brought it up, it was to make it the same as what you guys already felt you were accepting. To make it the same as the fire chief, and the fire chief wanted to be under the manager. So if you guys felt it was the same, that you had done something that was the same, that's what I brought up. I didn't bring up anything else at that time, but over the months that it's taken place, a lot has surfaced.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I am leaning towards it being under the manager.
The police chief too?
Yes, because there was no accountability. In the past, there have been chiefs that have told other council members, I don't account to you guys, I want you to know that. So if they don't account to the city council, then they don't account to the manager, then they don't account to the citizens of this city. So some kind of, not rein, but some kind of decision needs to be made on how this takes place. We do have a say to an extent. That's what I didn't want, to give it all up.
That's what
Because we're a small town and we know who's up.
Okay, so let me ask you this question now. So if we have an investigatory happen on the manager, then are we gonna let the managers get rid of the police chief if he don't like him?
I don't think he's gonna get rid of him just because he
No,
don't
I'm just
like
asking.
him.
No, I'm just asking. No, I'm just asking.
I'm just answering.
And then after this, Councilman Hemphill has a.
For me,
something to
one of
say.
the keys was that there is an appeal process or a grievance. Is that the right
Correct.
term? A grievance.
Yeah.
So if we had any department head, including the police chief, dismissed by the city manager, they would have the opportunity to file a grievance. That would come before us.
So policy states right now, department heads don't have
Yeah, I
that
was just gonna say
option.
that.
Okay, well, I asked that last time and was told that,
I believe that, I know, in fact, I know someone who presented here tonight who was a department head, filed a grievance against the former city manager and went through the grievance process. So I believe it is available to all department heads.
That needs to be added in policy.
and that is.
It's in
Yeah,
there.
that's the way it's
It's in there now.
What number is that, please?
Yeah.
written. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'd like to have a copy of that too.
And
Yeah, yeah.
again, assuming that is the case, that's all the involvement I would need is to hear a grievance. And if I ever felt, again, I hate to say I, because the point I made last time was, for me, this is any council, any manager, any police chief, any city clerk. That would be the part of the process where I would give my input. And if I ever felt after that process that we had a city manager that was going after, for lack of a better word, any department head, then I would have a problem with the city manager. And I'll add too, I wouldn't have a lot of sympathy for any department head who didn't file a grievance.
And I also wanted to keep track during the budget that the department's concerns were brought forward, that the pay scale and pay would get identified to take care of losing any more officers, that we stayed current. And we have messed that up, plus they had like almost a 20-year not written down, policy that wasn't even written down. It couldn't be identified. It was all came forward verbally on what we believed we had. We didn't, this needs more organization.
Go ahead, John.
Vice Mayor, members of council, again, to reiterate what we talked about in the last meeting, the idea behind the structure as written is predicated on the fact that there's an assessment process that occurs. So whether I select a human resource director or a police chief, it's the same process, and that process is a professional vetting interview process in which you assess the qualifications of the individual in front of you, right? So in the case of the police chief, that process would be even more involved, and the one we're looking at now would involve internal, external panels. It would involve council in some type of meet and greet. They would be able to provide input. But the bottom line is that the assessment of these officials is done in a professional manner through a professional process. It's not something you decide on one night where you say, I like your choice or I don't. It's done empirically, right, as a process using multiple people, right? So the whole idea behind the structure as written is predicated on the fact that the people doing the hiring and the firing and everything that happens in between is based on working closely with those individuals and using professional personnel management techniques to both select, manage, and if necessary, let those individuals go. So it's not about me as a manager, it's about the form of government that you're in. You're in a council manager form of government. The council generally sets policy, and it's the administrative staff that runs day-to-day operations. And so the structure that is given to you is one that reflects most closely your form of government.
And Vice Mayor?
Go ahead.
I'd just like to add to that, my position hasn't changed in the fact that, I can't imagine any scenario where I would have enough information to weigh in properly on the evaluation of any city employee, department head, anybody beneath them. I don't assess, I don't evaluate, I don't supervise, I don't do anything related to any employee. So I'd be at the mercy of whatever the city manager brought to us. If we had to approve a termination, I'd be at the mercy of just that information. I'd have no other information than what was presented, unless, again, a grievance was filed and there was a hearing. So I'm not in any different position, and don't expect to be qualified to make those kind of determinations.
So, I'm just saying, I don't feel safe not having any say at all. Okay? I just, the grievance portion, I don't think there's a grievance if you get fired. That needs to be looked at.
And I'll agree, Councilman Arbizo, by the next time, if we could just get that cleared up, because that is an important part of it to me. If that's completely in place as if we are assuming it is at the moment, that provides enough of protection for me.
Correct. That's just for department heads.
Right. Well, and I'm sure there's a grievance process for employees that are terminated that goes to John. It's the same setup. It's if Chrysanda's terminated by Danielle and wants to file a grievance, John's gonna hear it. It's the same setup. If Danielle is fired by John and wants to file a grievance, then that jumps John and comes to us.
Yeah, and I think with the last meeting, if I understand right, Danielle, did I ask this question? Were you in here? At the last meeting, I asked about if the supervisors had recourse of any kind. Did I ask that question?
You did, and they do through that policy.
Okay, all right.
Councilman Lopez, did you have something you wanted to?
No, if the police chief doesn't have a grievance process, then the officers don't either, so that needs to be addressed and be part of the policy written down. They need grievance also.
Well, the employees do, department heads though, have that opportunity.
There is a grievance process for department heads, right? That's part of the overall grievance process.
Yeah, if we could just
I'm
get
talking
that,
department heads, yeah.
yeah.
But not the council. I don't think we go to council, John.
The council is the body that hears the grievance. There's a subcommittee, I believe, selected by the mayor that hears the grievance if an employee files a grievance. Now, it's a question of what are the criteria to be able to file that grievance. Like, they can't grieve, I don't think, their evaluations. But I think there is a grievance process in fact, the presenter this evening used that process with a former manager.
When was
I
that time?
agree with you. If the grievance is against the manager, I agree it goes to council. I'd like to talk to Danielle. I don't know that employees can go around you up to council, but I don't know for sure.
Well, the way it's written now, any employee appeal would come to me. I don't think employee appeals go to council, just department head appeals, I believe. But let us research that process and make sure so we don't misspeak, but I'm pretty sure that's the way.
Vice Mayor, when was the last time when we sat on that board, for that last incident with, Manager, Horatio Ski?
Oh, gosh,
That was a while back, huh?
a while back, yeah.
So my only concern is just, I would like to have the councils, I'm not saying we're on every hiring board, we're on, all that. I'm not saying that, any of that. I'm just saying the option is there. If a problem does arise, we're not left out. Because if we're kicked to the curb, then, and there's a concern that comes up, what do we do?
What we're left out of what, if, and I don't
the policy, it goes straight to the city manager right
Well,
now.
let's see what comes back now after all this
But the
discussion.
council, if you're left, if he takes out the city council, it's all up to the city manager.
True, and that's what I'm asking, what would be left out of that we shouldn't be left out of?
That's what I'm saying, if a concern comes up where someone, you know, maybe the citizens are coming to us and saying, hey, what's going on up there? Well, I don't know, we gave it all to the city manager, we don't have any say in who gets fired and hired.
Yeah, I'm not quite
Stuff
understanding
does come to
Okay,
us
so if we
now.
approve this,
Right.
we're left out.
of the hiring and firing
Well,
process.
I'm just saying,
That's all we're left out.
I'm just saying, if there's a question or a concern that came up, we don't have any say in it.
We don't already.
No, we don't already.
We're in it right now.
Danielle, can you pull up, grievance procedures, section 10.3 real quick?
Yeah. We don't have any say about the police department now.
That's what it says in the policy, right?
Do they have a
We did.
computer with that ordinance?
With the approval of the city council.
We currently have approval, the current policy is that the firing of the police chief would come to us, correct? That's the current.
as of
Yes,
right
and
now.
it's the
Okay.
only position like that.
That's the only thing we'd have a say in. If there's issues down in the police department, I don't have a say in that anyway. How they're handled, what discipline happens, evaluations, putting people on notice or not probationary periods, but what's the other word I'm looking for, John?
You mean disciplinary action?
Disciplinary action. We have no say in any of that already.
And I'm not wanting that. I'm just wanting to have the opportunity in case something questionable arises, then we have, but if the way we're going right now, we don't have any say at all.
For me, that would be the grievance process.
Could Mr. Vice Mayor, section 10.3, page 404, says the city manager or his designee's response to grievances from employees below the department head is the final decision. Department head grievance against the manager does come to you. But
Correct.
employees who have a grievance that is appealed to the manager does not come to you unless it's policy. I'm looking at a policy dated 6/24/2019.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Sims.
So as
Yeah.
I said, there is a grievance process, and if a department head goes to council, the mayor convenes a subcommittee, that subcommittee then hears that grievance for both sides, as occurred
Yes.
not all that long ago.
Okay, any more discussion?
Okay, yeah, I want to see it real quick. I know that Attorney Sims read it, but I'd like to see it.
So it's this last part here that you're most likely referring to?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. There you go, zoom in on it.
Second to the last paragraph.
So any grievance against the city manager goes to the council, and then there's just grievance procedures for staff that go to the city manager.
And just one more quick point. Anybody that's gonna be terminated is gonna have, for whoever the city manager is, whoever the department head is gonna have all kinds of documentation of the issues that have occurred and again, that's not a process I'd wanna be part of. Any city manager that tried to terminate a department head without any of that documentation, without any of that, all the processes you'd have to go through before you could terminate an employee, we would be needing a new city manager.
But my concern is, by the time we get to that point, the people that have left, and I feel bad for them,
What people would have left?
that's what I'm saying. If it
You mean
happened,
the department head?
or whoever, it's like,
Well, who's whoever?
that's what I'm saying, no, I'm not saying right now, I'm not saying what's
No, I
going on
mean,
right now, but I'm
Do
just
people go
saying,
beneath the department heads?
but does it have to get to a certain point where we lose people to,
You mean, when you say people, do you mean department heads or do you mean employees?
oh,
Okay, employees, we have no, we're not even the grievance people we're only talking about the the department heads.
That's my concern.
So if we're losing a bunch of employees, we would be looking at having city manager problems?
Yeah.
Like, I don't even,
Councilman,
So we wait for them to leave and before we do something? See what I'm saying? It's like.
no, not at all.
No,
I
go
don't
ahead,
see it
John.
at
I
all.
don't understand. Go ahead.
Vice Mayor, members of council, again, the point I think that's being made is that we have policies in place that dictate how these processes work. You don't just walk in one day and declare someone's gonna leave or fire them. And I think that there's a lot of procedures that are in place that are incremental over a period of time. And again, it gets back to the original point, which is if there is some level of heartburn over someone leaving, what is the basis of that? If you're not involved with that individual on a daily basis, if you haven't gone through that process for 2-3 years with that individual, documenting what they've done, documenting their behavior, documenting their lack of performance, if in fact at the end of that process, the result is termination, and then to what end? So I come to you with all that material, and then in an executive session, in a couple of minutes, you decide 3 years' worth of interaction with an employee, which obviously has been documented, and who's gonna provide that documentation? Generally, it's gonna be me, right? And working with the human resource director, right? So again, what is the basis of that decision? Which is why the genesis of this conversation was essentially, whatever the desire may be, I understand what you're saying. The problem is that the ability to do the necessary assessment simply doesn't exist if you're not involved with that individual on a regular basis. There are a number of reasons that people leave. In fact, there was a comment made the other day about an individual who may be leaving. And it was interesting because the basis of that comment was, the implication was far different than the reality that I discussed with that individual. So again, there is a process. That process is very detailed. It's very detailed for the very reasons that you're talking about, right? You don't want to just be marching people out the door just because you don't like them. That's not what it's supposed to be. You should be documenting all of that. And again, back to Councilman Hemphill's point, if that's not happening, you don't need a better policy, you need a better manager, and you should change the one you have.
Well, and I don't want to leave so much confusion. I guess where, it just hit me that where I'm struggling, Luke, with some of your points are, you're talking about people leaving. How many people have to leave?
Yeah.
Well, that's not termination. You're talking about people just choosing to leave, right?
Well, it could be both.
Well, we're only talking about a hiring, firing policy right now.
Yeah.
We're not, so I guess that's where my confusion is
Well, and that's
how,
the only alteration, right? Because everything in between is the same.
right. Yeah, so people leaving is a separate thing to discuss for.
People make choices all the time.
Manager, I have a question. What if a department head is fired without cause? I'm just asking.
Well, there's a number of recourse depending on what that if they're wrongfully terminated, someone would have to determine what that wrong was. There are protected classes, there are all kinds of different things that they could file some type of legal recourse and say, hey, this is my interpretation of the situation, I believe that, and again, Bill probably can elaborate on this more specifically, but there are other avenues from a legal perspective that they could pursue if they feel that they've been let go for wrongful reasons.
So
The
aside
manager's
from,
correct. I mean, your workforce is, they can be terminated at will. But what John is saying, that is if indeed they're terminated for a wrong reason, age, race, disability, then they would file a grievance, and that would come to you, the council, if it was a department head,
so aside from the grievance policy, we also have a very entailed discipline policy, and it essentially escalates. So best practices, verbal coaching. If verbal coaching doesn't work, then you escalate to maybe a written warning, and it goes up from there. I like to say you have to work hard to get terminated, because my job, along with the city manager's job, is to protect the city, and we're not gonna fire people without following those proper protocols, unless maybe there's like a really extreme case of like gross misconduct. in any sense, if we're letting an employee go, we've followed our policies, we've got documentation that we need, and we've certainly inquired with our employment law lawyers to make those types of decisions.
Do you have to follow them like verbal first and then?
Not necessarily, depending on the situation, it's just best practice too. Anytime that you can, depending on the situation you want to.
Yeah, it would depend on severity. If it was a really severe situation, then you could skip the steps, but that's pretty rare. Usually it's an incremental, over a long period of time process where you've documented multiple incidences.
I would think if something controversial, I need to want to share with the council. All you gotta do is look on the news, there's city council after city council after city council, who don't know what's going on in their cities. And, they get 1 hour of the rest. I would think if something's really fancy, we would want to share it.
Well, Councilman Andazola is requesting exit interviews, so they're getting all the info they need.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for the
Thank you.
great discussion. Now we'll move on to number 11.
Vice Mayor, I need to read that ordinance into the minutes.
Hmm?
I need to read that ordinance
First
into the
reading?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and just before you do, just to be clear, so we'll read this into the record, we'll come back with a second read, and during that second read, you could make alterations if council as a whole decides. You still have that opportunity, just so you know. So Councilman Arvizo, obviously, if we go to the next stage, you can still have this discussion, and if changes need to be made, they can be made.
Ordinance number 023-006, an ordinance of the City of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, amending Title II, Chapter 2.12, Sections 2.12.010, officers, and 2.12.040, vacancies, holding more than one office, Chapter 2.20, Sections 2.20.070, powers and duties, and 2.20.080, internal relations, Chapter 2.24, Section 2.24.010, City Clerk Duties and Responsibilities, Chapters 2.32, Section 2.32.010, Public Works Director, Duties and Responsibilities, Chapter 2.36, Sections 2.36.020, Appointment of Officers, and 2.36.050, Duties of Police Department, Chapter 2.48, Sections 2.48.020, City Magistrate, and 2.48.030, Assistant City Magistrate, and Title 15, Chapter 15.04, Section 15.04.010, Building Official of the City of Safford Municipal Code to modify and clarify appointment and reappointing relationships of specific city officials.
Thank you. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 11, old and new business. If everybody had a chance to review the January 9th City Council.
Vice Mayor, I make the motion, we approve the minutes from the January 9th, 2022 meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Then we'll go to the financial reports. First will be the P-card reports. Any discussion on that?
I'm good on that one.
Okay, anybody else? Expenses over $5,000?
I didn't really understand, the replacement on border marketing, 118, replacement of 8 mega meter for Fry Mesa water usage at the golf course. That's like $15,000. I didn't know, do we even care how much water the golf course gets from Fry Mesa, other than keeping track of it?
Vice Mayor, City Council, that was my purchase, so the golf course actually does take in Fry Mesa water. That meter is used to report to the GRIC, so we actually have to record all the usage that we take from Fry Mesa and put into the golf course ponds up on the south side of the course. The old mag meter, the converter went out and it was obsolete, so we did have to replace that mag meter. So that's what that purchase was.
Like, I can understand wanting to keep the history of our usage for further studies on that. that we got out there, so wasn't really sure why.
Right, yeah, so that meter does record the flows coming from Fry Mesa that we use, that we have to report.
The other one was, waste tire removal. Do we not make any money getting rid of our tires, or at least pay for them getting removed? We don't sell them to somebody?
Mayor and Councilman Lopez, that, you'll notice in our operating budget, we pay CRM. We're contracted through Graham County. Graham County runs our tire disposal program through the state. So we pay CRM, that's reimbursed through the county tire replacement program. So they basically offset our revenues, offset our expenditures, paying CRM every year. Does that make sense?
So it isn't all out of our pocket?
We pay them, but that money comes back to us through the county and through the state for our replacement program. So we have to pay the contractor to come haul them off, but we get that money back.
So I can chill out?
You can chill out. We'll keep tabs on it.
Anything else? Then we'll move on to revenues over 5,000. Guess there's none. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 13, announcements of current events.
I have one.
Okay.
I'm on the board for the aging in this corner of the state. There's concerns that have come up with some of the costs being involved with aging. Money's being taken away or used in a different manner. I don't have all the history of it. I did get to mention it to Congressman Sistamani a few days ago. It does do us good to have Supervisor Howard and Jennifer Griffin on his advisory council. But we also have it coming up, I think the 19th or 20th, a board or a meeting. I'll try to make sure you all get the email, and I hope you share it, to go hear this at this hearing and state the concerns. The main reason is that lots of times surveys are taken, and especially after this last census, 2020 census, we need all the input we can get on these things to make sure we get our monies for this area. I'll put out the information as I learn more about it. I know the manager in his last Siegel meeting got more information.
Could I just embellish on that just briefly?
Sure, please.
So there's a public hearing scheduled for the Agency for the Aging, and it's on March 9th, and it's at 2 p.m., and it's at the General Services Building, at the County General Services Building. And so it's an opportunity for people to come out. It's a public hearing. So again, it's on March 9th. That's a Thursday. It's at 2 p.m. and it's at the Graham County General Services Building. And we're also planning on doing a radio show in March on the 16th, which I believe also is a Thursday. And we're going to bring in Laura Villa, who runs that Agency for the Aging for SEGO. As a part of that strategic planning retreat I went to, it was very clear to me that part of the issue we face is information. So we're trying to make increased connections there and to get information more out in the community, to make people aware of the need and also their opportunities to work in different programs that they provide. And I think they have some vacancies, so we're going to try to get that word out so we can help fill some of those vacancies. So again, that's March 9th is your first crack at it, 2 p.m. at the Graham County Services Building, and then on March 16th, we'll be doing a radio show for informational purposes.
Thank you for cleaning me up.
Okay, and then on Friday, I was at a Siegel meeting in Bisbee, and I think the one important thing that came out of it is Resolution 23-01. Basically, what that resolution was, I'll read it. Is a resolution of the of Siegel serving notice to the officer of the governor of Siegel's intention to designate itself as a planning agent under Section 208, and that's a Clean Water Act. And what it really means is that a few years ago, I think in the 70s, Siegel was designated to be, have the clean water, to take care of that. Things like ongoing maintenance of the area-wide water quality, ensuring public participation, the statewide water meetings being held, and it was underfunded. It was slowly just let go. And so what Siegel did, this resolution states that as of the end of the fiscal year for Siegel, which would be the end of 23, Siegel will assist in the transition of the water quality control management responsibilities of the 4 counties, Cochise, Graham, Greenlee, and Santa Cruz, from Siegel to ADEQ. So in other words, Siegel will be out of it. It was underfunded and everything. So that was the main thing at that one meeting. Was there anybody else that?
I don't know if it needs to be an agenda item, but, in the past, we used to have a program of like dump the drugs. I don't think we do that anymore. We also used to have a time once a year where we shredded a lot of the paperwork the citizens may have and bring to a point. We no longer have that or have been utilizing that. We also used to have, like, children could be fingerprinted and the card given to the parents in case there was a need for them fingerprints, heaven forbid, in the future. Those are 3 items that I don't know what happened to them, or why we no longer do them, or should we continue to do them? Hey, sir.
I'd like to add to that, we used to take hazardous materials at one time of the year also, like old paint and that kind of stuff. That's gone away also.
Chief, did you want to comment on? Okay, you stood up, so.
Just a quick question, Vice Mayor, Councilman McGoy, was the hazardous materials, was that like a special day where we designated a day where people could drop it off, and was that always, like, any day you could bring it?
No, it was a special day that they set up, I think, at City Hall.
Okay.
With some containers, and you went in specific places and was handled by different companies.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else have anything else? Then, any request for future agenda items? Operational items? Matt?
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to be up here tonight to talk about the ACMA 2023 Winter Conference. This was my first ACMA conference that I've attended. I had the opportunity to attend because I was invited this year by the city manager. So both him and I went to the winter conference up in Sedona. During this conference, it was a great professional development opportunity. We talked with a lot of different people regarding the global economy, networking in general, communicating with staff. They talked about the Colorado River and drought response activities. One of the key takeaways from that is that water levels are up from previous years in Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Hopefully they can continue and come out of the drought that they've been in for a long time. But other things besides that was there were lots of sponsor networking breakouts. There were lots of different vendors there that we were able to talk to. On the final day, we actually had the opportunity to talk or get a presentation by Rounds Consulting. Jim Rounds is the president of that company. He's the best economist in Arizona, does a lot of work with the Commerce Authority, which also Sandra Watson, the CEO and president of the Arizona Commerce Authority, spoke. Really good presentation by both of them. During that presentation, we were able to meet with Keith Watkins, who is also part of the Arizona Commerce Authority. He deals with rural development, and we made a connection with him, and he was very interested in the development of Safford and Graham County especially. So it was a great trip, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks. You want to give yours?
Yeah, I can give mine. Vice Mayor, members of council, again, it was, Mayor Couts that had requested these, so I think that was Matthew's first ACMA, and part of the point of going to these isn't just nose to the grindstone all the time. It's an opportunity to meet and share time with people who do what you do and share your passion for what you do, and so it was a great opportunity for him. We did get some information on the economy, some ideas about the way the revenues are coming in, things to look out for. In our budgeting one-on-ones, we had an opportunity to discuss some of that. So there is good information to be had, but it also is not illegal to actually enjoy yourself, and that's the header on the agenda is you can have fun, we won't arrest you. So anyway, we did learn some things, and we did have some fun. My item is the SEGO strategic plan, which is percolated through the meeting tonight a couple of times, so I'll be brief, but I did want to give a flavor overall of SEGO. So SEGO, Southeast Arizona Governments Organization, had a retreat. They have a retreat every approximately 3 years. SEGO is a regional planning agency, or a COG. We talk a lot about MAG, Maricopa Association of Governments, also a COG, so there are 6 in the state. And so ours is SEGO, which contains Cochise, Graham, Greenlee, and Santa Cruz counties. So all of those individuals had participants in the retreat. There were both electeds there as well as staff. And so SEGO provides several programs on a regional basis. These were kind of born in the 70s, again, by the federal government for regional planning purposes. There's the Area Agency on Aging. There's community development, which you'll know we do our community development block grants through. Economic development, which for SEGO is mostly a data gathering. They have a lot of data on their website. Transportation, which 20th Avenue, the TIP, there's a transportation improvement program, and the TIP is a pass-through from the feds to the state, which then goes to SEGO and then goes to participants. We funded a large portion of 20th Avenue through that process. And there's also maps and GIS. They do mapping, GIS. They're doing road assessments right now. And then the water quality management plan, which the vice mayor alluded to earlier, which will go away. It was a very small program, and essentially it was another layer of bureaucracy. So ADEQ will provide all the same services that was intended to be provided by SEGO. So again, the strategic planning event happens every 3 years, and there's an opportunity for folks to get together and to share their priorities for their region with SEGO, with the idea that SEGO then says, well, as we develop our strategic plan, are we meeting the constituent needs? So I put together, and hopefully I can find what I put together. Luckily, while I was at the meeting, I decided to find a use for my phone, and I took a picture of what we came up with. So these items were discussed, and you can see it's both Graham and Greenlee counties, and Commissioner David was there, Dustin Welker was there, Heath Brown was there. So we had individuals from the county region, both elected and professional. And so what we started off doing was saying, these are things that are important to us, at which point we then prioritize them. And I think that Councilman Lopez may have some heartburn or consternation that I just wanted to beat you to it. So obviously, number one, water, no surprise. And again, SEGO's role with water is limited. Housing, which is a multi-layered issue, dealing with issues of affordability in the market, and that can be problematic. Transportation infrastructure, things like roads, obviously were a priority. Grants, and again, this is kind of a current situation, because there's so much federal granting dollars out there. There's sometimes a lack of staffing and expertise to access that money. Economic development, both local Main Street and skilled labor came up. Recreation and tourism, something that we hold near and dear to our hearts right now, and we're trying to develop. Also blight and beautification, something we're looking at. Broadband, obviously important to everybody. Law and order, communication, regionalism, again, this is more trying to find ways to cooperate on a regional level. When you make application for some of these grants, the regionalism aspect of it enhances the viability of those grants. And of course, there are other issues in terms of just cooperating with area communities to try and solve issues together. Homelessness, again, an issue not just of our own, aging issues, and then of course wastewater and reuse. So we came up with the ideas, we listed them, then SEGO staff would then incorporate these concepts into their strategic plan. And so in the end, my takeaway was, and my input to them was basically that I feel like there's a communication issue between SEGO and the member entities. And if you take something like economic development, right now they have an incubator project down in Cochise County and Sierra Vista. And, you know, it works great for them, but incubators where you try to do business startups is what I'm talking about. They're a very low probability of success, and they may work for Sierra Vista, but we're not gonna do that here. And so one of the recommendations I made was, by minimizing their overhead, because they're doing a class comp study, they've had a lot of turnover. How do we maximize their input to us? And my recommendation was that you do it on an organizational level. So they ought to try to identify within each entity, so Safford, things like the Small Business Development Center, the city, the Chamber of Commerce, find points of intersection organizationally where they can provide expertise, and then they pass that expertise or information off CDBG. Do we want to go beyond that and look more at blight? Maybe they become a repository. They find connections for us at the federal level for blight issues. And so what ends up happening is that you create organizational interactions that allow you to have a more organic answer for your community. So, for example, if economic development, if their gentleman that's running economic development were to come here and he met with the chamber and SBDC, maybe the Downtown Association, he would be able to understand our needs more, and at that point maybe provide us with expertise or access to websites or information that may fit us. So we may not want an incubator. Maybe what we want is, we want to have, you know, downtown businesses create an online presence. They don't have the skill for that. Maybe they help train them to do that. So again, for me, with SEGO's emphasis on minimizing their overhead, this would allow them to interact with us, I think, more efficiently, and then allow the area agencies within each community to pick up the kind of the water or the ball and run with it, and that would allow us to do what we needed more on the local level. So anyway, I won't talk about it anymore. It's really a very interesting time, and I think it is valuable to share that, because these regional organizations really cross jurisdictional boundaries, as do some of the issues we face. So it provides us, transit's gonna be coming up in the spring. I think there's federal money for transit. We may be looking at that issue again. They do assessment of roadways, so again, it helps them to kind of cross some of the boundaries that limit what we can do and share. And so I think they serve a useful purpose, but I think we as an entity, and so do the others, need to provide more useful feedback to them if we want them to be more effective. That's all I have.
Thank you, John. Okay, then we'll close the regular meeting and reconvene into a work session. Okay. Do we need a motion for that? We need a motion?
No.
No?
Oh, sorry, no.
No, okay.
I was thinking executive session.
Okay, the first item, Attorney,
Almost. Not yet.
first item, Journey Line Level Worker Apprenticeship Program.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. This is a request for Mayor and Council to provide discussion and direction on the Journey Level Line Worker Apprenticeship Program in regard to step increases being processed while employees complete this training. Increases have been processed in the past for apprentice line workers. While they're in the apprenticeship program, the practice of processing these increases has not been put into a formal policy format. The included presentation reviews the basic concepts of these increases as well as the proposed policy that is being recommended to be added to the citywide compensation plan. So real quickly, just an overview. The practice of processing increases while an apprentice line worker is in the apprenticeship program has not previously been created into a formal policy. The training is 4 years long, and at the end of 4 years, the apprentice line worker becomes a journey level line worker. Within the 4-year program, an apprentice line worker must complete 2,000 working hours as well as pass a final every year. In the past, after an apprentice line worker passed their yearly final and completed their 2,000 working hours, an increase was processed. The calculation being an increase equal to the difference between the base wage of the journey level line worker and the base wage of the apprentice line worker divided by 4. At the end of the 4-year program, the final increase is processed and the employee is given 2 years of work experience credit and placed on the pay range accordingly. So currently, the pay range for an apprentice line worker is $48,000 to $73,000, and the pay range for a journey level line worker is $67,000 to $101,000. The yearly increase is equal to 9.6% for 4 years and is calculated using the entry level salary for both positions, which is approximately $4,700 per year. Last increase being slightly higher to account for experience when placed on the new pay range for journey level line worker. Do you have any questions so far? The proposed policy is as follows. For the first 4 years of an apprentice line worker's career, the employee will be placed in a STEP program. The STEP program entails an increase equal to the difference between the base wage of the journey level line worker and the base wage of the apprentice line worker divided by 4. The STEP increases are contingent upon the apprentice line worker completing 2,000 working hours per year and passing the Merchant Power Line Job Training and Safety Program annual tests. Documentation of both must be provided to HR for processing. When the employee successfully completes the 4-year training, they will be given 2 years of work experience credit and placed on the pay range accordingly. Employees in the STEP program will not receive performance-based merit or COLA increases until they enter the citywide merit COLA system. However, the pay range for these positions may change based on regular market reviews as approved by council. The key takeaway here is while in the STEP program, the apprentice line worker does not receive COLA and performance-based merit increases. Once they are out of the STEP program, they receive all type of increases that all city employees receive. With that, I'd like to open it to discussion.
So again, we're in a work session, so it's kind of more freewheeling, right? I think, again, with no comments right away, I just want to say that in the process of looking at compensation, which we've done comprehensively, this was another form of compensation that was different than the baseline. So we had the police STEP program, the skill-based program, and we also have the electric program. So again, these are, the police and the electric program are 2 ways of compensating employees that differ, at least for a period of time, from the standard compensation plan. Now, the idea is, having identified these, having written them down, having given them to you, that we then look at that comprehensive compensation plan and decide, you know, are these things we want to have? Do you want to have things standardized and so on? This particular program is based on an industry standard. There's a lot of testing that goes on. They go through multiple tests and then an annual test 4 times. There is basically a 10% increase in each year. That is an acceleration through the steps to get them to a journeyman lineman. So this really, to my mind, fits very much the definition of having a specialized program that accomplishes a specialized need and does it in a very rapid way. So again, this is simply, you've got your main compensation plan, the COLA merit system we talked about. You've got the police STEP program with their differential pays, and then you have the electric workers with their testing and going from an apprentice to a journeyman lineman within a 4-year period.
Then after the 4 years, they go into the regular system, like.
Correct.
Right. That's right.
And this is something that's taking place now, been taking place for a long time. I think you just want to recognize it and make it a policy.
That's correct. And the idea, again, is to bring everything to you in one document that covers all the compensation that we do. Whether it's police, whether it's electric, or all the other employees, you see everything that we do for all of those things. Write it down, so we have it to pass on every year. We can review it and tweak it, but at least it's all in one place, and we can keep it up to date and keep it in front of council.
And then you might think it's silly, but journey line level worker is journeyman, not man, it's journeyman. Journeyman is a level of professionalism that's been achieved, and so I don't think the title needs to be played with.
Okay. Got that?
Yes.
Sorry.
What if it's a female?
It's still a level of achievement, journeyman level.
I think
So-
he's referring to man.
Not journeyman, but
Yeah.
journeyman, you can do it whatever you want, but it's not to identify a gender, it's to identify a level of professionalism. Yeah.
I have a concern. So, if they don't get a COLA in those first 4 years, is that right?
Correct.
So, when would we reevaluate? Because I don't want it to get far behind to where we're having to catch up like we are right now.
So their increase is quite a bit more than a typical COLA increase. What I've seen the last 2 years going through the league is at most like a 4% COLA. With this, they're getting a 9.6. And that's probably even more than a typical COLA plus a merit, performance-based merit. So they're not getting behind, and then as soon as they go into the regular compensation plan, they'll start getting the COLAs and performance-based merit.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
So, and then their range, if we do like a market review, when somebody's in that program, their range can change based on the market. So they'll still get market so that their range doesn't get behind.
okay,
They just don't get the COLA and the performance-based merit.
that's what my concern. I just
Yeah.
don't want it to approve this and then
Right.
we leave that number there and everything keeps going up and we keep that number there.
Yeah, so with our new compensation plan, regular market reviews for all positions are gonna take place every 3 years.
Okay.
And we did review it with the utilities director, and in fact, what we did, based on our discussions, was that we added at the end of their 4-year period, because they are accelerated at that almost 10%, that's a big jump every year. But we added a piece at the end, based on the discussions, that in the final step, they would actually be eligible for merit as well, because, based on the conversations, the feedback we got was, well, not everybody will come through that process the same. Some people may excel more than others. So in addition to the plan as presented, which is the way it's been done, we actually added on to that the ability for them to get merit at the end of the 4th year to recognize somebody who was a high performer.
My comment's the same, Danielle, I just appreciate that it's all getting cleaned up and
Yes, it'll be
organized.
nice to be organized for sure.
Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you.
The next we'll move on to the 2024-2028 capital improvement plan.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and Council. This is a request for the council to continue to apply, or to continue to discuss and feedback on the CIP, the proposed CIP that we have. We do have a presentation, a truncated presentation that we gave last time, as some of you guys weren't able to attend that, so.
Just before they start, I did send an email today with the link for that, so if you guys want to go back and look at it, you can.
So I guess jumping into it really quick, there are a couple things that you guys should have. You guys do have a CIP package, and we do have a couple extras here if you guys don't have them. This has the layout of all of the proposed projects that we're coming up with our CIP, and then also you should have a smaller packet that has the changes or proposed changes for the new projects and adjustments to them. So if you guys don't have those, let me know and we can get you a copy of this one.
I didn't bring mine tonight. Thank you.
So kind of jumping into the CIP sheets, there was a couple things that we wound up changing this year, just for a quick review.
The thing that's highlighted in red is we wound up coming up with this initiation date. We had a few little carryover projects, and so this is kind of when that CIP kind of gained life. And so it'll show you kind of essentially the initiation date. So everything that's highlighted in blue here was things that you guys have kind of seen or been accustomed to in the past. So no changes if it's highlighted in blue. Same thing here, we do have a detailed project description as well as the justification that has not changed. Section in here about the funding and then the funding source. The last thing that we did wind up changing on these sheets that you may see new this year is on the bottom here, we put a section in here of O&M. So if the project was new, we're trying to project out what that cost is of continuing to operate that project instead of whether it's labor or associated with cost of upkeep. So help projecting the operating budget to make sure that we're accounting for it.
And that falls into a constant cost.
Could be, yep, absolutely. And it's kind of broken out in a year, so we may get a one-time cost of, now that we've started it, we have to do extra Y and Z, or it could be an annual basis of whether it's labor, we have to have a new source of somebody to take care of this resource. Whatever it is, yeah, it's a projection on continuing costs going forward. So. Kind of review really quickly some of the steps that we improved this, or that we took this last year to try to improve the CIP. We did wind up creating this CIP oversight team, which consisted of the city manager. You had both directors in there, Lance and Jason, as well as the finance director, Rob. You had myself in there, and Matthew, and Andy, who's kind of our contract specialist that's in the engineering. We kind of set out with a lot of different objectives, and we'll kind of jump into each one of these a little bit in more detail, but we had a lot of issues around inflationary pressures. As I mentioned, some of these projects got carried over from year to year, but some of them may not have got adjusted. Last year, we've seen a lot of inflationary pressures with regards to projects and cost alone. So we also wanted to kind of organize and provide directions on each of these projects, a little bit of a vetting process. We'll talk a little bit about the ranking system that we kind of came up with and we're trying to implement. So we also wanted to kind of get a better bridge in between the funding sources, how much we had in there to maintain our 50%, as well as the sequencing of those priorities. So give it a little bit more comprehensive approach to it.
And you say inflationary concerns, is that also less grants, less money out there for us to get, or you're not seeing us have monies coming in?
So the inflationary, this directly on this one, for this bullet point here alone, is really the cost of materials and labor. The grant side of it is actually been a little bit more generous this year with a little bit more sources that are out there. We did wind up picking up a couple extra projects from ADOT based on available funds that weren't into this year's CIP, so of last year. So the funding and the grant sources were a little bit better off, but the costs have significantly risen.
And that's why you identified a grant writing person.
We would hope so. I think they could be a great benefit. So.
Just want to throw that out there for you.
Nice plug. Thank you so much. And then the other thing, we're kind of, like I said, a lot of this is in work. So we want to try to standardize an approach. A lot of this, we want to try to come up with a cost or an estimator tool. A lot of it was either we received a quote, so we put that number in there, or we kind of took a guess at it, or we got an engineering's estimate. And so we were kind of all over the board when it comes to estimating and cost. So we want to try to standardize that and make it centralized so that we're all kind of talking the same language. And then also kind of the project submittal process. We talked a little bit before about the procurement process here. We'll jump into it here probably more detail. So probably be better to do it in the slide. This right here is kind of talking about some of the improvements that we try to look at. This is actually talking specifically about inflation. This graph on the right-hand side here was kind of a composite of different things when we were trying to evaluate what the inflationary pressures were. There's a national construction index, the inflationary index that we use for single-family homes. We took the CPI data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and put that in there. And then more locally, we put that little grayscale, we put that for construction cost index for Phoenix. You can see that's kind of, from a local level, that's kind of the one it's the highest and probably the one that impacts us the most. So what we did for the exercise in here, we took an average of all of those, and that's what we kind of used to project out inflationary pressures. they're probably still on the low side from what we're seeing with regards to some of the costs coming through, but it's an effort that we're putting forward, and we kind of refine this going forward, hopefully, and get a better projection, so. The other thing, yeah, we talked about a little bit about the estimating cheat sheet, so. The second thing that we want to talk about is the ranking and the scoring systems. At any given time, we had about 50 to 60 projects in the CIP with really no direction on which one was the highest priority. It was really kind of subjective on which ones we focused on. So what we tried to do as a team, tried to put together this ranking system to where it kind of, by default, put our priorities for us. It took out what I thought was right, or whoever else thought was the highest priority, right? So we kind of broke it into different areas. We call this one like a social impact. We kind of rated it out based on points. We looked at it from a social point of view, where we're looking at, are we trying to increase tourism or search what we call social growth? We also wanted to look at serviceability. Who are we servicing? What does this project focus on? Is it those that are in need? And then also kind of looking at it from a ranking system of where did the request even come from? Was it from a city council? Was it internal? Is it from the citizens themselves? And try to give it some point system within there. The other thing that we wanted to look at was an economic impact. We gave that a 30-point system. Obviously, what we wanted to look at was growth. If we're actually developing new infrastructure, got a higher ranking, higher priority. We also wanted to be kind of self-sustaining, so if it generated cash, it got more favorable points. And then we also kind of looked at a timing sensitivity, right? There's a lot of projects that, to try to delineate, we must have them or we want to have them. So to try to delineate some of that, we put another factor in there as well. The one that had the highest ranking on there is we wanted to put it in there for the funding source. If it was grant funded, it got the highest ranking. If it was semi-funded, or if it was just all internal costing. So we gave the favorability to anything that was externally funded. The last thing we wanted to look at was a risk or impact, depending on the complexity of the project. What we wanted to do, first off, is the first segment is to look at the number of citizens impacted, focus on the area that had the most citizens impacted. If it was a cost, we wanted to look at if it was very complex in the costing, that's an at-risk if we entered into it. So we gave a favorability to the lower cost, quicker, faster projects to get through. So, and to the last bullet point there as well as the complexity of the project. So anything that had a faster build time, we put a higher priority to. This is the other bullet point that we're kind of talking about, is we wanted to kind of build this philosophy approach to how we get a project going. There's a lot of different ways that we can kind of make a project manifest itself. Here's a list of a handful of things that we can wind up doing. We won't go through each one of them, but it's a lot of different avenues, a lot of different ways that we can pull it. We've had a handful of projects this year that's kind of gotten started several different ways, because we'd go down one avenue through discussion or feedback, we'd wind up going through a different avenue. So it did wind up chewing up some resources on us, so we want to try to make a flow and a path that's a decision matrix. So it's faster, it's more efficient, we don't waste a lot of resources. So you guys will have the opportunity to weigh on this when we get this kind of fleshed out and finished out. So, and the same thing, we want to make sure that we have all the documentation. We're trying to make this as a working packet for whoever comes in, takes over. It's standardized. It's kind of a training resource more than anything. So, just a quick review of last year's CIP. We did wind up completing these projects here on the left, or at least anticipated to complete them through July. We've completed close to $12 million worth of CIP projects. So some of the highlighting pictures there on the right.
When we sell that copper that we are retrieving, does it go back in the general fund?
That
Or does
is
it
a
go back
question
to
more for probably
electric?
Rob than myself. I was thinking Christmas party,
Goes
but
back to the electric? The Christmas fund. Yeah, that'd be a heck of a Christmas.
Gabe, and I don't want to jump off topic too much, but is there, it was part of the last slide, but is there an update on the chamber, on the flat roof
So that one was requested, that was one of those projects that was probably started 3 or 4 different ways. We will wind up taking that formally to bid. We do have about 3 other projects that we're putting bid packages together, just so you guys understand what that looks like. The last bid package that we did had about 180 pages worth of documentation that goes with it. So
Wow.
it's not a simple process, and so when we go down them, we'll definitely bring that back, and that'll be a standalone project in the CIP. But with that being said, that's part of the efficiency of making sure that the lower cost items, we want to make sure that the local preference is there if they
Right.
get the bidding opportunity. But to answer your question, it's in queue.
Right.
And with what Mr. Henfield's saying, once a project is started, how do we get the updates on them? You know, how are they flowing? We used to get them once in a while. I don't know if that comes out on your individual reports that are online or where we stand with them. You know, we're at this part, we're at 20%, but we've spent 40% of the money, which could, you know, different things.
Yep, and we're open to whatever that looks like. I know we used to do a quarterly report that we probably should do more often. If there's a different avenue that makes sense to you guys, that's easier to digest or visualize, we're open to whatever that looks like. So we'll go back and we'll come up with some ideas and we'll see what kind of works for you.
Okay, sir.
This is part of that vetting process that we were talking about with regards to the group. There was a lot of projects that were on there that's been carried over, kind of snowballed and rolled into the next year and the next year. So the list here has been either moved out or removed completely based on the feedback from the group that was reviewing the CIP. So they either got pushed out into what we call our 6 to 10 year project list, which is not included in your guys' CIP, but kind of just to keep it out there on the radar and not to lose it, or it's been removed completely. So with that, we'll turn it over to Rob.
Thank you, Gabe. Vice Mayor, members of the council, now we'll walk through at a high level what it's going to take to get this funded on a 5-year proposal plan. Doesn't like my fingers. There it is. All right. There were a couple of projects that, upon looking at them and getting some additional design work done from our January meeting, that we obtained additional information. So a couple of those, we had some pretty significant updates in engineering estimates. The first is about a doubling of cost, if you will, for the Hollywood Road construction based on a design that we received. In addition, we had budgeted about $1 million for the airport water project, and that's coming in now at about 3.3. So given some of the constraints of available funding and going back to some of the prioritization or ranking that Gabe talked about, we moved some of these projects around based on what's the priority. So just because it's more expensive doesn't necessarily make it less of a priority. It still might be a priority for the organization or priority for the community, like Hollywood Road. However, in order to make sure we can fund everything that's necessary, we did look to Airport Water Project to move that out a year or two later based upon the projections of the cost. We also looked at a couple of projects. Now, the first one there on adding of a project, that server room remodel, we did bring as a separate sheet at our January meeting, and that's to do with some roof repairs or ceiling repairs within a facility that we just put new equipment in. So best to not have anything leaking on top of very, very expensive IT equipment. And additionally, we've added a project to improve kind of a remote meeting capability of this facility. So that way you as a council can rest assured that your city attorney, who may be remote, can observe, see exactly everything that's happening here, what's on, as well as others in the community that might be able to interact in a different way from a remote meeting perspective. So that was an additional project that we added to improve that remote meeting capability. We did meet specifically with OB Sports and Troon, the operators, managing operators of the golf course, about where we had placed some capital projects based on what we believed was important. And working with them, we came up with some additional estimates. Some of them went down, some went up, and as well as moved those projects around based on our priorities as the facility owner wanted to mitigate risk to that facility for us, but also to improve the interaction that the community might have in use of the golf course. So there were some additional changes up as well as movement around. So if you're looking at the detail and saying what changed, in essence, this is what changed and all of that. You don't need to read every page in the packet that is provided to you.
No, can I just, is the city of Thatcher involved in that too, any of this?
They give us in-kind utilities, basically.
But just how does that really match up?
Well, it's a conversation that we had when we renegotiated the contract. So, there was discussion about trying to get some cash, contributions. They didn't, come forward with that. I think the former manager made a few adjustments in the budget as a result of that, but it's an ongoing conversation, and there may be other opportunities for us if we go forward to do things like a different irrigation system out there or something, that we may go back to them and see if they want to participate in that way. But again, it would have to wait for another renegotiation of the contract before we had that discussion.
So now we're getting on to how we're going to be funding this, but first and foremost, maybe a change in how the city has looked at their CIP over time. Introducing a new concept in where we're grouping similar types of projects together in the term called program area or program distribution. So this is an easy way to help communicate to the community and help understand how are we going to spend $82 million or almost $83 million. So you can see there for general government it's about 7%. These are similarly situated types of projects, whether it's just general government, it could include police, economic development, and the like. You can see where our streets at about 13% of that pie. So a quick, easy way to kind of describe to the community, here's where our investments are going to be made. The vast majority of them, as you can see, are in our enterprises, water being the largest component, then in our electric utility, and finally within the airport. So when you look at that and you say, geez, airport, 18% of 83 million, how are we going to afford that? That is going to come on the next slide on how we align the funding then to this pie and this puzzle.
And how much did it go up from the previous years?
Correct. So just to kind of focus here on within 83 million, our first year proposal for 23-24 is roughly 27 million. And of that, 53% of that is grant funded. So as Gabe indicated before, that we look to provide a higher point score when we're using outside funding to where we don't have to dip into our pocket. But we also want to make sure that these are fruitful projects and that they are actually meeting a need of the community. At our meeting in January, this sheet or this slide had it, I think, at a higher level. The council members indicated they'd like to see it at a bit more granular basis. What this is describing is how we're going to fund our CIP over the 5 years based on those funding sources that you see at the bottom of the bar charts. General fund, grants, loans or debt financing as necessary, HERF funding, basically all of our street financing that we have coming in, and then finally all of our enterprises lumped together. So didn't really delineate how much is the electric going to pay, how much is water going to pay. Rest assured they're all paying their appropriate, so we're not having water pay for anything that's directly electric related. As you can see on the bottom, if you can see that, you kind of have to squint. The bottom bar, the bottom portion of each bar is the general fund. That general fund component over the 5-year period is about $2.2 million. So a very small component of the 83 million that we're looking at over the 5-year period. You can see within that first year, it is less than $1 million request, and most of that is a carryover from prior year's projects that we're looking to move forward. You can see into fiscal 24, grants are making up a fairly large component of that, and finally our enterprises, that next component. The other thing we wanted to highlight here is on the right side is the listing of the top 11 projects. So anything that was over $2 million, 11 or 13 projects now that we've added a couple more because their cost went up. As you can see, 2 of those projects equate to 22 million and change, which is the vast majority of our CIP. So, and those are coming in those particular years. And that's how we're going to be funding them. Most of that is going to be coming either enterprise funds or coming from loans that we will then pay back as debt service over time. If you were to look at all of those heavy hitters and say, well, how much of that is of our entire CIP? Those projects that you see there equate to about 65% of our entire capital improvement plan. So while our plan includes other smaller projects, 25,000, 150,000, while it's not small to most people relative to these other projects that have some dramatic impact as well as perhaps are covering over multiple years, is the vast majority of our capital improvement plan. One thing we wanted to bring to the council tonight is a conversation to continue as to what we had talked about at our January meeting, which was really discussion on the new fire station. There was $5 million set aside in the CIP in January. We had aligned that to the general fund. Given we wanted to have this as far as discussion, whether you wanted to add it back or not, we have currently in our 5-year plan that $5 million is sitting there as debt financed, and so we could have some conversation with you. We do have Chief Bingham here to walk us through kind of some of the options that staff has been talking about, and we're looking for some discussion and direction from the council. Chief.
Vice Mayor, members of the council, you see in option 1, we have $5 million for a new fire station. Currently, the fire station, we are full. We are limited on room, but we are making it work, and making it work effectively. I, as a fire chief, the conclusion that sticking the citizens with the $5 million, probably more like 7, with the way the inflation is. That's my own estimates, not official. I believe that is not out of an option. I've been hearing about a new fire station since 1999 and the prospects of it. So that has not come to fruition. I don't know how long it's been in the capital improvement budget cycle prior to 2012 when I became chief. It has been in a very long time. Option 2, the things that we do need are restrooms. I have one restroom for 32 people. It has no showers, no urinal. After a long night of fighting fire, it is a line and other resources are utilized. I have no showers. I've had firemen who've had to climb into septic tanks, who have been covered in blood at an accident scene, covered in soot, which are cancer-causing agents. And the availability to take a shower and decontaminate at a place that is not their residence, where their wives and children do not reside, would be an extreme benefit to this. Fulton Herreras from Building Maintenance has designed a usable space that is currently incorporating the restroom we have, but gutting it all out and been able to come up with a $30,000 plan to have women's restrooms with showers, urinals, make this work for quite a few years. Any equipment we have does fit in the bay. We have 11-foot tall, 40-foot truck that fits in the bays fine. Any future trucks will fit in the designed areas. Those can be built as necessary. I don't see the city getting another truck for another eight years, replacing any equipment for another 8 years. So, in my opinion, I believe upgrade to the restrooms, shower facilities would be a very big benefit to the fire department. Questions? Comments? Concerns?
I believe I brought this up recently because we had talked about in the past that once we got the effluent water to the fairgrounds and we started capitalizing on the monies that we had in the contract for them buying it, then we were going to start looking at a fire station. It didn't mean that it was an absolute, but it did mean we were going to start looking at it when we had the funds readily available. And at that time, when we started it, it was about 7 years out from that. So I just wanted to make sure we weren't forgetting it, where we stood on it, and that we were still headed in that direction. And that's where that came from, as far as I brought it up.
Right.
Okay, I got a quick question. For $30,000, why can't we just build a restroom and a shower here? Out of $80 million.
So I guess to add to your comment, Councilman Lopez, is from my understanding of the reclaim line going out to the fairgrounds, I think that payback is based on the construction cost of putting the line out there. I'm not sure that there was money set aside, and I'll kind of look over to Rob here, but I'm not sure that there was money allocated from that, other than paying back the construction cost. So we'll look into that in a little bit more detail, but I don't, from my understanding, it's not.
It was like, once it went out there, what they were paying for the water would stay the same. And then it would, whether it was effluent water or drinking water, they were gonna continue paying the same. And that's how we were gonna satisfy some of the loan that we had at that time. That was gonna be dedicated to that until it cleared up, which would free us up to go forward with possibly a fire station.
And it may very well be. We'll check into it and see, but from my understanding.
That's correct, though. The effluent line, when we got the WIFA loan, the switch over, right, the payments that the county would then pay for now for the effluent, not the potable, the effluent, would cover the cost of the debt service on the WIFA loan, and it worked out to do exactly that, right? So the current monies that flow in will cover, so that flowing from the county for that effluent will cover the debt service on the WIFA loan.
Okay. Don't wanna start all over again.
No, that's correct.
We've talked about placing monies out there already.
So now, what the other component of that was the property tax. So we gather the property tax, we pay the debt service on a police station, whatever's left over from that goes into a fund. Now, it's a very small nominal number, you'll be here till the next ice age if you use that to pay for it, but that's the other component that goes in there. So it does pay, and it worked out very well that, because we got like a 30-year loan on the WIFA line, the monies that flow in from the payment on that use of that water does pay the debt service. So that gets us to a point, but remember that the payments that are being made on that are in your wastewater fund. The payments that would be made on the fire station would be general fund money.
Okay, it gets all turned around, and I just wanna make sure we're not losing track.
No, I think you're right. I think it's the nexus between the two that may be getting lost here, because anything we did on a fire station would come out of the general fund.
And I guess just to add to Clark's comments, option number 2 we're not eliminating the fire station, we're just putting it out in the out years, right? And so when the time comes, we'll carry that in our future 6 to 10 year plan, so.
Yeah, that's what I'm keeping track of.
So right now
Keep kicking it down there and coming up with.
So right now, what you're
Yeah.
kinda looking for,
Yeah.
like the upgrade of the restrooms and the showers, I think that's really necessary.
Oh, yeah, the chief got millions in his budget, he's all right.
Well, and I think that the issue that we have is that we're in a situation now where inflation's kicked in and it's driving up the cost of the projects, right? So a big part of what we try to do is reassess the process. How do we put capital projects out there so we go, are we getting them done in a way that's timely? The other part of it is, given inflation and given the cost of these projects, if we start to reestimate them, how high do they go? As the prices rise, you can do fewer of them, so now your prioritization process becomes key. So we came in with a process that said, here's how we want to prioritize those projects, because now that's a thing. And then the final step of it, and really what this gets to is, once I prioritize those projects, once I determine the monies I have to expend, what I want to see in the 5-year CIP is what I would call a fully funded CIP, meaning anything that's in that CIP, I can pay for. Because if I keep bringing you a CIP and it's full of all these projects, you look at it and go, oh, look at all these projects. Well, if I can't pay for half of them, then it's not giving you a realistic expectation of what you're doing. So therefore, again, the idea became, let's do a 6 to 10 year where we have a list on the side so we don't lose track of them, so we keep track of them. And this was kind of the last project that was sitting out there right now that there was no real mechanism, there's no estimates, there's no drawings, there's no design as far as I'm aware of, that said, why is it $5 million, what are we looking at? And so, again, the idea was, can we move this out to 6 to 10 years, still hanging on to it? You could move it back in next year. But the idea is that if we really don't have a plan on how to build it, or what it really costs, or what the need is that we're filling, then maybe we ought to push it out to the 6 to 10 year mark, especially with the high cost. So again, this presentation and the way that it's structured is meant to kind of give you how we reassess CIP in general, and how we're coming at it in a way that we want to make sure that when we bring you projects, you understand that, hey, these are projects we can actually build.
We're going forward and trying to maintain a rating that over 100 years of volunteer firemen got for us.
Yes, I agree. Work session.
Is this 30,000 on your program correct, or is the 100,000 on mine?
I believe 100,000 was the estimate.
So we originally just put it in the original presentation as 100 because it was a placeholder and we didn't have any idea. Since then, he's right, Fulton's went in there, he's kind of put together a tighter estimate on what he was projecting. So we're right now more confident in the 30.
Thank you.
And that's an add, this is an add to the CIP.
This is an adjustment to it. So
Oh,
this
it-
was actually in the CIP,
Right.
so this would be just the,
Right.
So yes, it would be an add.
The 30,000
Yes,
is an add,
and the
yes.
5 would be
An
a
adjustment.
takeaway, although
Right.
we didn't really have any funding source for it, at least at this point.
Right.
that's correct, yeah.
So then we need a recommendation to,
Well, I guess
Direction.
the general direction is council comfortable with us if we move the fire station? Now, it's not the end of the world, but it's the sake of consistency that anything is in there that's something that we kind of want to be able to actually fund. And if the intent is to say that within 5 years we want to build a fire station, then we probably want to start looking at the size, the need, and then any design or any other movements of, I know there's an old public works yard that we talked about. So if our intent is in year 5 to start basically funding and building a fire station, there are probably things that have to happen before that. So if that is our intent, then we need to have direction so we can start doing those other things.
But the 30,000, that it will be done this year, or
Yeah.
next year? Right, okay.
Well, I'm still listening to the chief, so we'll find out what's
I
going on.
agree with the chief that,
Mhm.
that the need is further out than, I mean, it'd be nice to have, but it's not a need for 8, 10 years, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's where it all starts, right? First you define the need, then you define the facility, so.
I mean, if you come up with a whole lot of extra money you don't know what to do with, yeah, let's build it.
happens to me all the time.
So Vice Mayor, members of the council, we'll make these adjustments before we bring back to you the full 5-year plan with the addendum, which would be for those projects that are pushed out to years 6 and 10. We'll bring that project or that entire capital improvement plan for your adoption prior to the tentative budget to be adopted, which is where you actually adopt next year's dollars. But we would like to get approval of the full 5-year plan, so that way it gives staff that direction on those projects that we're working on and move that forward. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and close the work session and reconvene into executive session. We'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. The motion, can you vote to go into executive session, or you want to take a break first?
reconvene our regular meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a. All in favor?
Aye.
You were right.
I make the motion, we adjourn.
Now we gotta.
Okay.
Second.